Chapter 51. Discussing the sword control technique. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 51. Discussing the sword control technique. Translator. Nyo.io Studio Editor. Nyo.io Studio. Zhou Yun clenched his fingers, and the flying swords in the air flew up and down rapidly under the sword control technique. In just a short while, the flying sword had made a full circle around the cave abode. The next moment, Zhou Yun changed his hand seal, and the extremely fast flying sword suddenly stopped in front of him. Not bad. This is the moderate stage of the sword control technique. Within 100 meters, the sword will reach wherever I point. Zhou Yun touched the body of the spiritual sword in excitement. It was the first time he had used the sword control technique, and he had experienced the long-desired feeling of controlling a sword. He could not stop for a while. Let's go. Zhou Yun struck while the iron was hot. He leaped up and stepped on the flying sword again, flying quickly in the cave abode. After a long time, Zhou Yun felt a lack of spiritual energy in his body. After the flying sword shook, he slowly came to a stop. Right now, my spiritual power is 10 times that of an ordinary cultivator in the elementary of foundation establishment stage, but I can only maintain sword control while flying for 8 hours. If it were other cultivators, their flight time would definitely be even shorter. Zhou Yun was calculating the amount of spiritual energy he had left, trying to figure out under what circumstances it would be safe for him to use the sword control technique. He didn't want to use the sword control technique too much and end up with insufficient spiritual energy when facing the enemy. Therefore, in order to retain enough spiritual energy, Zhou Yun had to calculate the amount of energy he could use to fly using sword control. However, Zhou Yun had never thought that even he, who had so much spiritual power, had to be careful when using the sword control technique, let alone the other cultivators in the elementary of foundation establishment stage who lacked spiritual power. They might not even be willing to use their spiritual power to use the sword control technique. Moreover, the sword control technique was one of the most difficult techniques. Just like the sword intent, one could only improve a little after thousands of days of practice. If an ordinary person were to see that Zhou Yun had actually cultivated the sword control technique to the moderate stage in a day, they would definitely shout that he was a monster. Generally speaking, only cultivators in the intermediate or late of foundation establishment stage had the spare time to use spiritual power to control a sword to fight. In the elementary of foundation establishment stage, the sword control technique was just a decoration. Phew. Zhou Yun kept his spiritual sword. He felt that he was not far from achieving greater mastery of the sword control technique. As long as he continued to enter the state of enlightenment, he was confident that he would be able to break through the great stage of the sword control technique within 3 days. At that time, my spiritual energy can directly attach to the spiritual sword, and with a wave of my hand, I can take the head of a person from 1,000 meters away. Zhou Yun felt that the sword control technique, once cultivated, was too convenient. Compared to sitting cross-legged to regulate his breathing and cultivate his spiritual qi, he seemed to prefer the feeling of traveling the world on a flying sword. Let's put in more effort. After I master the sword control technique, I'll also master the sword intent. This way, I'll have the ability to protect myself even in the foundation establishment stage. Zhou Yun sat cross-legged next to the spiritual spring. He did not waste a single second as he adjusted his breathing and absorbed the spiritual energy to cultivate. Even before obtaining the system, he could be called the most hard-working cultivator in the entire Spirit Valley. Now that he had obtained the system, Zhou Yun was like a tiger that had grown wings. Instead of being arrogant and complacent, he would become stronger step by step. 5 days later, Zhou Yun descended from the sky on his flying sword and sat cross-legged to regulate his breathing. Strange. I've been in the enlightenment state every day. My Kunlun sword control technique should have entered the great stage long ago. Why can't my flying sword fly out of the range of 100 meters? While Zhou Yun regulated his breathing, he summarized his problems. He had thought that he would be able to break through the moderate stage of the sword control technique on the third day and be able to control the spiritual sword to a distance of over 100 meters, breaking through the limit. However, when he tried, he realized that the problem was not as simple as he thought. Zhou Yun seemed to feel a thin membrane. Every time he tried to command the flying sword to fly 100 meters away, his control over the flying sword would weaken. If he did not retrieve the flying sword in time, he would even lose control of the flying sword. BDNVL.M losing one's own weapon in battle was definitely a severe matter. It would be as if he put his life in someone else's hands. Zhou Yun caressed the spiritual sword and felt the pockmarks on it. He pondered over it and wondered where he had made a mistake. There's no problem with the amount of spiritual energy, and I've also awakened my divine sense. In that aspect, I can control the spiritual sword from a longer distance than ordinary cultivators. There's no reason for me to be stuck at the moderate stage of the sword control technique. Zhou Yun couldn't figure it out and could only helplessly give up on thinking. He wanted to use the sword control technique again and experiment with his body to find out what the problem was. What? Just as Zhou Yun got up, he staggered and almost fell. Fortunately, he stuck his spiritual sword into the ground to support his body, so he did not fall. I've used up my spiritual energy again. Even though I haven't made much progress in the Kunlun sword control technique, I'm getting more and more familiar with the release of my spiritual power, so it's not like I didn't gain anything. Zhou Yun's spiritual energy had been completely exhausted, so he could only give up on cultivating. He turned and walked in the direction of the spiritual spring. As he walked, Zhou Yun scratched his head. Zhou Yun's black hair was originally smooth and silky. If his appearance was rated 100 points, his black hair contributed 66 points to it. It was his most eye-catching feature. However, Zhou Yun realized that after continued practice with his flying sword, his hair had been blown back by the wind and currently resembled a broom head. Forget it. I haven't found the reason why I can't make a breakthrough in the sword control technique. I'll take a break to cultivate and find out the reason. Zhou Yun gave up on the idea of using the body-cleansing talisman again. He wanted to soak in the spiritual spring, recovering his spiritual energy while finding the key to the problem. He felt that he couldn't just blindly cultivate blindly. Zhou Yun left the cultivation area of the cave and walked in the direction of the spiritual spring. The next moment, he stopped. There's a sound. Zhou Yun was puzzled. Why would there be someone's voice beside the spiritual spring in his cave abode at night? Ever since he saw Su Lingyun, Su Wenyi's older sister and Ling Qingyun's direct disciple, getting drunk, he couldn't bear meeting her. Therefore, Zhou Yun would deliberately avoid Su Lingyun's activity time. That was even if they hadn't seen each other for 5 days since Su Lingyun had been staying in her room. But why was there a humming sound coming from the spiritual spring in the middle of the night? Zhou Yun thought of 2 possibilities. One was that Su Lingyun was using the spiritual spring, and the other was that someone had broken into the cave. One had to know that the spiritual energy in the outside world was scarce, so the spiritual energy in Zhou Yun's cave abode was worth the risk. Therefore, Zhou Yun gripped his flying sword and became vigilant. Even though trespassers would not be so stupid as to hum a song while carrying away the spiritual water, there was always a what if. Not wanting to alert the enemy, Zhou Yun carefully stuck his head out to take a look. The moonlight shone through the hole on the top of the cave and onto the spiritual spring, imprinting a silver scale on it. In front of the spiritual spring, a young girl was sitting with her back against a spiritual sword. She looked lonely as she raised a bottle of sake to the sky and downed it. Perhaps the girl drank too quickly, but the clear wine seeped out and soaked her face, sliding down her cheeks like tears. Zhou Yun was taken aback. Unlike Su Wenyi's maturity and gentleness, Su Lingyun was more unruly, unreserved, and bogged down by worries. Zhou Yun was stunned for a few seconds, and he couldn't help but grip his spiritual sword tightly. He only came back to his senses after his palm was pierced by the spiritual sword's dent. At that moment, Su Lingyun also turned around, and their eyes met. They were both stunned. Ah, they both said. Chapter 52. The Cause of the Bottleneck. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 52. The Cause of the Bottleneck. Translator. Nyo iwo Studio Editor. Nyo iwo Studio. Zhou Yun and Su Lingyun's eyes met, and they were frozen on the spot. A few seconds later, the two of them spoke at the same time. I didn't mean to peek. I didn't come out on purpose. The two of them looked at each other at the same time. Then, the somewhat stagnant atmosphere was washed away, and Zhou Yun heaved a sigh of relief. Tell me, what's up? Zhou Yun walked over and sat down next to Su Lingyun. He then soaked his feet in the extremely precious spiritual spring. Hey! You're actually using the spiritual spring to soak your feet. Su Lingyun was dumbfounded. Then, she quickly reached out and covered her face. Blurg. Tisk, Zhou Yun looked at Su Lingyun, who was crazily vomiting, then turned his head to look at the moonlight in the sky. He felt that he should have continued to cultivate and not come to the spiritual spring. Why was it that Su Lingyun was so different from the mature, steady, and gentle Su Wani, even though they both had the same surname and looked 90% similar? A few minutes later, Su Lingyun, with clear liquid dripping from her mouth, cried angrily at Zhou Yun, detestable B*****. Do you know how precious the spiritual spring is and how many people covet it? Instead of using such a good resource for cultivation, you used it to soak your feet. Ah, I remember the first day I came here to cultivate, I even jumped in and soaked for half a day. Zhou Yun laughed as he spoke. That was the first time he had experienced the joy of cultivation without a lack of spiritual energy. Oh! How can you be like this? Su Lingyun almost couldn't hold back her tears. She covered her mouth with one hand and pointed at Zhou Yun with the other trembling hand. Hey, tell me, what did you do with the spiritual spring? Zhou Yun already wanted to leave. He really couldn't bear to see Su Lingyun's bitter face. If he could, he would rather see Qiaoer. If he really couldn't, Su Wani would do. What crime had he committed that he would watch a young girl puke in pain in the middle of the night for a top-level Foundation establishment mission? I used it to deliver wine. Su Lingyun lay on the ground, panting as she said, when I was in seclusion, I didn't have any wine at all. I could only keep cultivating. It's been a long time since I've had a chance to drink while cultivating my spiritual qi. Su Lingyun sat up and leaned against the spiritual sword. She had already lost all will to live. After observing your cultivation for the past few days, I specially chose to drink at this time when you wouldn't be around. If it's possible, I really hope I can return to being the me who doesn't know anything. Su Lingyun covered her ears with both hands and made a childish gesture, which was different from Su Wani's. She continued, forget it. I'll just treat it as an unlucky stroke of luck. What about you? Why are you here? Aren't you still practicing the sword control technique? Su Lingyun looked at Zhou Yun. She had not forgotten the embarrassing incident that day. Could it be that the genius who reached the moderate stage of the sword control technique in one day encountered a bottleneck, she said sarcastically. At the moment, Su Lingyun was too lazy to put on the same gentle smile as Su Wani in front of Zhou Yun. Having long ruined her image with so many embarrassing events, Su Lingyun became more open-minded in front of Zhou Yun. Yes, I have indeed reached a bottleneck. Zhou Yun looked at Su Lingyun's back, which was leaning on a spiritual sword. Zhou Yun could tell how precious the spiritual sword was just by looking at its appearance. Only the few elder-tier cultivators in Spirit Valley could choose a suitable disciple to inherit their legacy, not to mention that Su Lingyun was Ling Qingyun's direct disciple. Zhou Yun was a little curious. Besides being the direct disciple of the sect leader Ling Qingyun, was Su Lingyun also an expert in the sword? After all, he had obviously reached a bottleneck in cultivation. Young man. Su Lingyun crossed her arms and puffed out her chest, looking up with pride. Do you want to seek guidance from me, the direct disciple of the sect leader? Yes, please enlighten me, Zhou Yun answered directly. He would not refuse to become stronger just because of pride. Earlier, when he had just entered the Spirit Valley, in order to speed up his cultivation, Zhou Yun had caught hold of an elder and asked him many questions, causing the elder to be terrified whenever he saw him. Zhou Yun paid no attention to Su Lingyun's arrogance. If she was putting on airs, it meant that she was the real deal. Su Lingyun looked at Zhou Yun in disbelief. You didn't even hesitate for a moment. For the sake of increasing your strength, you suppressed your pride and lowered yourself before me. Do they call this the ignorance of a young man? Why? In order to become stronger, Zhou Yun couldn't care less about things like dignity. Ha! I really can't help but like you. Su Lingyun leaned against the spiritual sword and pointed at the sky with a stoic face. Come on, your spiritual power has recovered a lot. Use the sword control technique in front of me and let me help you find the reason for your bottleneck. Zhou Yun took out his spiritual sword. Wait. When Su Lingyun saw Zhou Yun's spiritual sword, she jumped up with a start. What's wrong? Zhou Yun asked doubtfully. Could it be that there was something wrong with him? But he had not used the sword control technique yet. Nothing. You can continue. Su Lingyun slowly leaned back and looked at Zhou Yun with a strange expression. Zhou Yun didn't mind as Su Lingyun was naturally weird. He attached his spiritual energy to the spiritual sword and formed a seal with his fingers, slowly activating the spiritual sword. Ooh! Su Lingyun's mouth opened into an O shape. When she saw Zhou Yun looking at her, she immediately covered her mouth. Su Lingxuan then quickly waved her hand to signal Zhou Yun to continue. Zhou Yun used the sword control technique to control the spiritual sword, making it assume various positions in the air. He then adjusted the sword's movement speed. The entire spiritual sword was like a flying bird that could stop at will, moving nimbly in the air. Zhou Yun had no problem controlling the flying sword in the sky, but he felt that he might be undergoing a different training method than he wished for. After all, the young girl at the side constantly made strange exclamations. If you have anything to say, say it. Zhou Yun couldn't stand the exclamations every time he used the sword control technique any longer. Could it be that his control was so bad that it was shocking? But Zhou Yun was very confident that he had mastered the moderate stage of the sword control technique in one day. It's not what you think. It's just, ha 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 ha, Su Lingyun stammered and finally turned her head. If you don't give me an explanation, I'll announce to the entire Spirit Valley that Su Lingyun, the direct disciple of the sect master, stole my bathwater. Zhou Yun felt his head heating up. Having realized that Su Lingyun was really out of line, he could only threaten her. Wait. Don't. Su Lingyun grabbed Zhou Yun's shoulders and said, I just can't think of any euphemistic words to describe it. Horrible. Zhou Yun asked. Yes, it's very bad, Su Lingyun answered seriously. My sword control technique is horrible. Zhou Yun asked again. That's not it. Su Lingyun let go and scratched her head. How did you manage to control a piece of scrap metal so well? My God, being too talented is actually disgusting. There's actually someone who can really control a piece of broken metal that contains only a few traces of spiritual energy to fly all over the sky. Su Lingyun hugged her stomach and laughed crazily. Bathwater. Zhou Yun's face turned cold. He had to discipline Su Lingyun. Junior brother Zhou, we hit it off the first time we met. I really can't help but want to give you a new flying sword. Su Lingyun stopped laughing and looked at Zhou Yun. Zhou Yun paused and narrowed his eyes before commenting, sure. Chapter 53. Purchasing a spiritual sword. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 53. Purchasing a spiritual sword translator. Nyo.bo studio editor. Nyo.bo studio. After yesterday's farce, Zhou Yun looked at his spiritual sword and sighed. This spiritual sword had accompanied him for quite a while. After Zhou Yun placed the spiritual sword in the cave, he turned around and left. Previously, he had been busy improving his innate ability and cultivating resources. Even if he used alchemy, the resources obtained were not enough to exchange for a good flying sword. After all, a flying sword in the foundation establishment stage would cost over 100 spiritual stones, not to mention a good spiritual sword. The latter would cost tens of thousands of spiritual stones. In the current era where spiritual energy was scarce, even sect leader Ling Qingyun did not have a sword that was suitable for his use. He was still using the weapons passed down from generation to generation by the sect leader. Although Zhou Yun's alchemy speed was very fast, if he really wanted to buy a suitable spiritual sword, he would not be able to do it in a short time. However, Su Lingyun was actually willing to spend her hard-earned money to buy a new spiritual sword for him. And recalling her promise from the day before, it was from the auction house within the treasure pavilion. Zhou Yun sighed, thinking, Su Lingyun is too out of line. She's the complete opposite of Su Wani. He didn't know if he could believe Su Lingyun's words. She can't possibly sell me off after she brings me to the treasure pavilion, right? After all, Zhou Yun was a once-in years alchemy genius. He felt that he had some value. What auction? Are you really looking forward to the treasure pavilion that much? Su Lingyun's voice came from behind. She was wearing a pale red dress that day and looked more mature. However, since Zhou Yun had learned about her true colors, he felt that it was a very strange look on her. Su Lingyun was like a husky pretending to be a border collie. Hey, what's with your eyes? I can tell. Su Lingyun raised her eyebrows. Remember our agreement. Don't expose me in public. I'm still that gentle and friendly direct disciple. Zhou Yun recalled that he had accepted Su Lingyun's request to keep her true appearance a secret. All right, he said. Zhou Yun would not say anything as he was still counting on Su Lingyun to help him buy a spiritual sword. That's more like it. By the way, my master asked me to give you this. He said it's your reward for discovering the heretic cultivator. Su Lingyun took out 4 small tokens and placed them in Zhou Yun's hand. A token for the spiritual meal. Zhou Yun didn't expect it. He had thought that the token had disappeared with Meng Feiyang's death. This thing is worth a lot of money. Su Lingyun counted with her fingers. 4 tokens of spiritual meal are worth at least 2 ordinary spiritual swords. 200 spiritual stones. Zhou Yun didn't expect that a token for a spiritual meal would be worth as much as 50 spiritual stones. You're wrong, it's 2,000 spirit stones. After all, even the most ordinary spiritual sword would cost at least 1,000 spirit stones. Su Lingyun stood on her tiptoes and looked down at Zhou Yun. I'm a direct disciple. How could I buy a spiritual sword worth a mere 100 spiritual stones for my junior brother? A token for a spiritual meal costs 500 spiritual stones. Zhou Yun didn't expect Meng Feiyang to have so many spirit stones. One had to know that the salary of an elder in the Spirit Valley was only 150 spirit stones a year. That's right. After all, Meng Feiyang is also from an immortal cultivation family, although not as good as the Su family. Su Lingyun suddenly covered her mouth and said, well, don't mind these small things. Just relax. I'll protect you on this trip to the treasure pavilion. Don't worry. Su Lingyun held the spiritual sword on her back. She didn't directly pull out the sword. Instead, she grabbed the scabbard and swung the sword. It was extremely cool. Your senior sister, am very powerful, Su Lingyun praised herself. All right. Zhou Yun nodded perfunctorily. At the moment, his mind was already on the information that Su Lingyun had accidentally revealed. Meng Feiong was from such a family. Then, would the exciting revenge segment happen next? Wouldn't Zhou Yun be in trouble if he left the Spirit Valley at this time? Zhou Yun was only at the elementary of foundation establishment stage. But if he were to encounter a cultivator at a later stage of foundation establishment, he was confident that he would be able to escape. Even if Zhou Yun faced a group of people, he wouldn't be afraid. After all, Su Lingyun had said that his sword control technique had actually reached the great stage. It was just that his speed and distance were limited due to the problem of the spiritual sword. If Zhou Yun were to encounter other cultivators, just his sword control technique alone would ensure his invincibility. Su Lingyun had said that not all cultivators could cultivate the sword control technique to even the moderate stage. However, Zhou Yun looked at Su Lingyun with a worried look. He could run, but he didn't know if Su Lingyun could. If he abandoned her and ran away, Su Lingyun might be caught. If you're really in danger, try to come closer to me, Zhou Yun said to Su Lingyun after thinking for a while. Although Su Lingyun was a little too free and easy, Zhou Yun didn't want her to be caught since she was able to fork out so many spiritual stones to help him buy a spiritual sword. Hey! I'm very strong, I'll emphasize it again. Su Lingyun stood on her tiptoes again, trying to assert dominance. All right. Zhou Yun nodded. Meanwhile, internally, he was imagining how it would be embarrassing for the Spirit Valley's direct disciple to be captured. Tisk, Su Lingyun turned her head and opened the door of the cave. Wait. Before Zhou Yun could react, Su Lingyun had already opened the door of the cave. Ha! Su Lingyun turned her head and looked at Zhou Yun in confusion. The next moment, she was pushed to the ground by a black shadow without any warning. Ah! Su Lingyun let out a scream. Ah! The black shadow sat up in confusion. It was only then that the black shadow realized the person she pounced on was not Zhou Yun, but a young girl. Xiao, I'm here. Zhou Yun had forgotten to remind Su Lingyun that Xiao would wait outside every time he was done with his closed-door training. If he happened to come out of his training, she would rush over. Brother Zhou Yun. Initially taken aback, Xiao rushed to Zhou Yun with a smile on her face. Brother Zhou Yun, congratulations on coming out of your seclusion. That day, Xiao was wearing an exquisite small tulip dress. The hem of the dress was retracted, revealing her fair legs. With the blue theme, it was pleasing to the eye, as if a real flower fairy was moving in front of them. Because of Xiao, many disciples stopped outside Zhou Yun's cave abode to watch. However, when they saw Xiao jump into Su Lingyun's arms with a smile on her face, they were stunned for a moment, and then many of them became happy. But in the end, when Xiao came in front of Zhou Yun and hugged his shoulders, many first became sad, then angry. Yes, Xiao, long time no see. Zhou Yun looked at the cute Xiao in front of him and couldn't help but sigh. As expected, having a normal girl like her around was important. Ah, so it's someone that junior brother knows. Su Lingyun's tone was soft. She gently patted the dust off her dress and then stood up with a smile. Her tender appearance was akin to the spring breeze, making people feel comfortable. The disciples who had been feeling sorrowful only felt a burst of gentleness. Hey, why did an extra person come out of your closed-door cultivation? Don't tell me you're doing dual cultivation. It was unknown which disciple had spoken, but the freshly warm atmosphere suddenly turned cold. All the disciples clenched their fists and looked at Zhou Yun. It was bad enough that Zhou Yun brought a beauty with him when he was in seclusion, but he actually wanted a second one. Feeling multiple stares at him, Zhou Yun shuddered in fear. Chapter 54. A new mission. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 54. A new mission. Translator. Nyo.bo Studio Editor. Nyo.bo Studio. Zhou Yun felt that this time, the gazes on him seemed to be even more terrifying than usual. He turned around to look. Other than Qiao, who was still obediently and adorably sticking to his side, there was also Su Lingyun, who looked extremely gentle. Su Lingyun pinched the edge of her dress and walked to Zhou Yun's side quietly. It was only a few small movements, and she did not even hug him like Qiao did. However, the way she stood quietly by his side was like a gentle wife quietly supporting him from behind, not to mention that Su Lingyun herself was not bad looking. She was 90% similar to Su Wani and currently seemed like a classic graceful and elegant woman. With such a wife, what else could a husband ask for? Zhou Yun finally understood why he was much more hated than usual by so many disciples. It turned out that Su Lingyun was also fanning the flames. Detestable. You better remember this. Zhou Yun turned his head and said to Su Lingyun fiercely. He held Qiao's hand with one hand and grabbed Su Lingyun's hand with the other. Hey, you wait! Before Su Lingyun could finish her words, a huge force stopped her. Zhou Yun stood on his spiritual sword and circulated his spiritual energy, doing his best to bring the two of them away from the furious disciples. Detestable. He can actually ride a flying sword. Despicable scoundrel. If you have the ability, come down and have a 1.1 fight. Yeah. We'll fight you 1v1. Running away is a cowardly move. Zhou Yun only heaved a sigh of relief when he heard the angry roars of the disciples trailing far behind. Brother Zhou Yun, you've learned how to ride a flying sword. You're so amazing. Qiao hugged Zhou Yun's arm and said happily, I can only make the spiritual sword move a few meters, but you've already learned how to fly on a sword. As expected, Brother Zhou Yun is the best. Qiao congratulated Zhou Yun from the bottom of her heart, as if she was even happier that Zhou Yun had learned how to ride a flying sword than if she had learned it herself. That's right, junior brother Zhou Yun is truly formidable. From what I know, there really aren't many who can learn how to fly at the elementary of foundation establishment stage, Su Lingyun said in a soft voice. She slowly pulled out the spiritual sword from behind her, formed a seal, and gently stood on the spiritual sword. Then, Su Lingyun gently nodded to Zhou Yun, and they let go of each other's hands. However, it's not elegant to carry a young lady like this. Junior brother Zhou Yun, let me do it. Su Lingyun made a hand gesture and pointed at Qiao. Qiao felt her body become lighter. Then, Qiao slowly floated onto Su Lingyun's flying sword, and the two of them flew together. While they were flying, Su Lingyun would gently help Qiao break through the strong wind, unlike Zhou Yun who was directly blown by the strong wind. Su Lingyun's flying sword was extremely quiet, and no one could tell that they were flying in the sky. May I ask who you are? Qiao asked. She felt that Su Lingyun was very gentle, and she looked just like Su Wani. However, Qiao knew that even though Su Wani was at the later stage of foundation establishment stage and still wasn't able to use the sword control technique smoothly. I'm Su Lingyun, Su Wani's elder sister and also the direct disciple of the Spirit Valley's sect leader. Su Lingyun smiled gently. It was as if she was carved out of the same mold as Su Wani. She was gentle and pleasant, and even Qiao felt a little more intimate with her. Zhou Yun was silent at the side. He didn't know what could have made the person who drank, read comics, and ate peanuts act like such a gentle big sister. However, Zhou Yun knew that he had to learn to shut up for the sake of his spiritual sword. Spirit Valley also has a space restriction. Let's land in front of the sect leader's hall. We can also apply for permission from the sect leader while we're there, Su Lingyun gently suggested. All right, Zhou Yun said. He had no objections. Application. Sister Lingyun, are you guys going on a mission? You just came out of brother Zhou Yun's cave abode. Qiao subconsciously clenched her hands. She felt that Su Lingyun was too gentle, and she was afraid that she would take her brother Zhou Yun away. Qiao. Zhou Yun suddenly spoke. He had discovered Xiao's unnecessary misunderstanding. "We're not what you think we are," Zhou Yun said from the bottom of his heart. He did not think that it was possible for him and a monkey to get together. Just as Zhou Yun was thinking about it, he noticed Su Lingyun's gentle eyes. A trace of coldness flashed through them. "We're only carrying out a mission," Zhou Yun said seriously. "Okay, brother Zhou Yun." Xiao nodded her head in relief. She could trust Zhou Yun unconditionally. Finally, the three of them arrived in front of the sect leader's hall. Zhou Yun used his spiritual energy to touch his head, and his broom-head hair became smooth again. "Then, we'll go see the sect leader. Xiao, can you please wait here for a moment?" Su Lingyun said gently as she pointed at the resting area beside the sect leader's hall. Following Su Lingyun, Zhou Yun walked into the sect leader's hall. The moment he stepped into the sect leader's hall, Zhou Yun noticed that Su Lingyun's face was paralyzed, and her smile disappeared without a trace. The gentle Su Lingyun just now seemed to be dead. That was the first time Zhou Yun realized that people could really change so fast. "Xiao, you should come in too." Ling Qingyun's voice suddenly rang out from within the sect leader's hall. Zhou Yun noticed that Su Lingyun's face, which was originally sunken, quickly regained its color. She turned around and looked at Xiao. "Junior sister Xiao, come in with us." Su Lingyun's smile was very gentle, and Xiao ran over happily to Zhou Yun's side. "Ah," Zhou Yun blinked his eyes. He seemed to have seen Su Lingyun's smile cramp up. However, in the next moment, Su Lingyun's face was covered with spiritual energy, and Zhou Yun could no longer see anything. The three of them walked into the sect leader's hall. Only then did Zhou Yun realize that there was another person besides Ling Qingyun. Xiao was very familiar with Su Wani, who was the senior sister of everyone in the inner sect. "Greetings, sect leader." Zhou Yun gave a disciple's bow. It seems that you have completed your task well." "Zhou Yun, you have worked hard," sect leader Ling Qingyun said expressionlessly. "Really, this task is too difficult." "I didn't let you down," Zhou Yun said sincerely. "Then, I'll give you a little more reward." Ling Qingyun's face was still expressionless as she raised her hand. Zhou Yun's body trembled, and 4 tokens flew out. Ling Qingyun caught the 4 tokens. With a slight movement, the 4 tokens suddenly grew in size. "Ling Yun, I received your message yesterday. Zhou Yun indeed needs a spiritual sword. You too are allowed to leave the valley." She continued, "However, on account of the 5 sects tournament that's coming up, I'll let you 3 move together and cultivate the team's chemistry. This spiritual meal can be considered as the mission reward this time." Ling Qingyun threw out the 4 tokens, and they accurately flew into the hands of the 3 people. Zhou Yun took the token and found that it contained a large amount of spiritual energy. It was a spiritual energy storage device that could absorb spiritual energy from spiritual stones. The more spiritual stones were stored, the higher the standard of the spiritual meal. Zhou Yun didn't know how many spiritual stones the token in his hand was worth, but he was definitely going to leave the valley this time. "I don't agree," a voice suddenly rang out in the sect leader's hall. Chapter 55. The Spiritual Heart Leaf. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 55. The Spiritual Heart Leaf Translator. Nyo.bo Studio Editor. Nyo.bo Studio, I don't agree. A gentle yet stern voice resounded in the sect leader's hall. That voice made people feel like an elder sister was protecting her younger brother and sister. Just hearing it made one feel good. It was Su Lingyun's voice. She no longer had a gentle look on her face, only a serious one. However, since she made that determined look because of someone else, it made others feel her gentleness even more. "We're going to reach the treasure pavilion. We'll have to pass through 3 big cities, and 2 of them are extremely dangerous. It's already so difficult to move forward. Not to mention, after we leave the treasure pavilion, there will be thieves eyeing its treasures. I'm afraid there will be another bloodbath. Su Lingyun's stern tone gradually became gentle as she looked at Su Wani gently. My favorite little junior sister is here this time. I really don't want her to encounter such danger. Su Lingyun's words were reasonable and well-founded, and she was also considerate of others. Not only Su Wani but Xiao was also touched. Meanwhile, Zhou Yun pouted his lips as Su Lingyun actually didn't count him in. Xiao did not expect Su Lingyun, Su Wani's elder sister and the direct disciple who had been in closed-door cultivation for 5 years, to be so gentle. It was no wonder that Su Wani had been so eager to see her elder sister who had finally come out of closed-door cultivation. Xiao turned her head and found that Su Wani was looking at Su Lingyun with complete admiration, clasping her hands together like a little fangirl. That's so nice, such a gentle sister, Xiao could not help but mention. However, at that moment, both Zhou Yun and sect leader Ling Qingyun could not help but cover their faces with their hands. They all knew that the reason why Su Lingyun spoke so righteously was that she had to pretend to be a gentle person when she was around others. Su Lingyun thought it was too troublesome to keep up the facade, so she didn't want the two of them to follow her. In the end, she still had to deal with the trouble. Ling Qingyun looked at Zhou Yun, indicating for him to help. In fact, Ling Qingyun was a little shocked by the letter she received from Su Lingyun the day before. Despite her character, Su Lingyun completely revealed her true nature to Zhou Yun and could drop her gentle facade with ease when with Zhou Yun. Ling Qingyun was very curious about what had happened between Zhou Yun and Su Lingyun. But that was a matter for the future. What Ling Qingyun had to do now was have Su Lingyun take them out of the valley to train their teamwork and also treat Su Lingyun's illness. Otherwise, Ling Qingyun didn't have any confidence to win the 5 sects tournament a month later. Zhou Yun caught Ling Qingyun's gaze, then saw Su Lingyun's smile and determination to win. By the way, I have something on my mind. Zhou Yun slowly raised his hand. As her smile froze, Su Lingyun turned her head and looked at Zhou Yun in disbelief. She opened her mouth silently and anxiously signaled to Zhou Yun. Zhou Yun knew that Su Lingyun was hinting at spiritual sword. He looked at Su Lingyun and then at the spiritual meal token in his hand. If Su Lingyun couldn't take the 3 of them out of the valley, the token would be gone. Su Lingyun could be betrayed. In any case, the spiritual meal token was worth more than a spiritual sword. Furthermore, Zhou Yun did not plan to only choose one. He wanted both the spiritual sword from Su Lingyun and the spiritual meal token. For us cultivators, pursuing the great path passionately and freely should be the way to go. Although there are risks, the benefits are great. Not only can it train our chemistry with one another, but it will also reward us with spiritual meals after the experience. That alone is worth a shot. Think about it, it's spiritual meals. And it's even in the form of a spiritual meal token given by the sect leader. Zhou Yun raised the token and pointed it at Su Wani. He continued, don't you want to try a spiritual meal, something you've never tried before? Zhou Yun knew that Xiao would definitely support him. Therefore, as long as he managed to pull Su Wani over, it would be 3 against 1, rendering Su Lingyun's objection useless. But, Su Wani was in a dilemma. After all, she liked her sister very much and did not want her sister to worry. I think I'll pass. After all, my cultivation level is not high enough to leave the valley. I might just be a burden. Su Wani didn't choose to go in the end. Su Lingyun looked at Zhou Yun with a provocative smile. She knew her sister's thoughts too well. Meanwhile, Zhou Yun narrowed his eyes at Su Lingyun, who was starting to be arrogant. He looked at Xiao, who immediately understood what he meant. Xiao asked, but don't you want to feel protected by your favorite sister all the time? Her voice was very soft, but everyone present was a cultivator, so they all heard her. Su Lingyun's face turned pale. Meanwhile, as soon as Xiao stopped speaking, Su Wani's serious voice rang out, we cultivators should not fear difficulties, should overcome obstacles, and change our fate. Good, good. Ling Qingyun said, good, twice. She really hoped that her direct disciple could grow a little more during the trip. Then, you should pack up and get ready to go out. I'll get back to my work. Ling Qingyun didn't give Su Lingyun a chance to refute as she immediately dispersed the group. Wait, I have a question, Zhou Yun stated. Su Lingyun's soulless eyes suddenly lit up. Su Lingyun looked at Zhou Yun and thought, could it be that he actually wants to help me? What's the 5-sex tournament? Zhou Yun asked what he had been wanting to ask. Back when Zhou Yun was in the midst of foundation establishment, the Grand Elder had said that he would have to participate in some competition. Moreover, Su Lingyun also mentioned the matter. Now, Zhou Yun had finally asked. You didn't tell him. Ling Qingyun looked at Su Lingyun. Su Lingyun turned her head. She had bumped into Zhou Yun on the first day, and her dark history was still replaying in her mind. The two of them had not even managed to exchange much words. The 5-sex tournament is a competition set by the 5 large sects within 100 miles of us, Ling Qingyun explained. In this era where spiritual energy is scarce, natural treasures are becoming rarer and rarer, and spiritual energy is becoming more and more precious. We don't have the ability to bear the burden of a war between sections. Thus, whenever they discover treasures, the 5 sects will distribute them according to their value and sect circumstances. Only extremely valuable items will be decided through the 5-sex tournament. Zhou Yun gradually understood the significance of the 5-sex tournament. He began to feel curious. What kind of treasure was it that was worth the time and effort of the 5 sects to hold such a competition and fight for? Forget it. You're all disciples representing the Spirit Valley, so there's no harm in telling you. Ling Qingyun could see Zhou Yun's curiosity, so she did not hide anything. Ling Qingyun added indifferently, this time, the treasure is the spiritual heart leaf, which allows one to face their true self. It's especially effective on the inner demons unique to the Golden Core stage and a treasure that some cultivators urgently need. Then, Zhou Yun subconsciously looked at Su Lingyun. He didn't expect that Su Lingyun actually had an inner demon. Chapter 56. The Heretic Cultivator reappears. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Chapter 56. The Heretic Cultivator reappears. Translator. Nyo.bo Studio Editor. Nyo.bo Studio. Zhou Yun stood on the outskirts of the Spirit Valley and looked at the small path that slowly extended in from the distance. He couldn't help but sigh when he saw the few servant disciples guarding the gate. Like most of the other disciples, he had spent almost all his time in bitter cultivation in order to avoid being laid off by the Spirit Valley. It was now past the halfway mark of the Spirit Valley's assessment, and most of the disciples in the same batch were still struggling to avoid being laid off. In the end, they were reduced to mortals due to the lack of spiritual qi. On the contrary, Zhou Yun could go to the treasure pavilion to buy expensive spiritual swords and even represent the Spirit Valley in the upcoming 5-sex tournament to help the direct disciples obtain the precious spiritual heart leaf. The difference between Zhou Yun and the other disciples could be described as the difference between heaven and earth. If Zhou Yun did not have the enlightenment system at that time, he might have been among the many struggling disciples. Or worse, he might have been directly laid off without having the chance to struggle since he was only at the first layer of qi cultivation at that time. Zhou Yun was filled with emotions. Feeling his own boundless spiritual energy, the sharp sword intent he casually waved, and the spiritual sword behind him, he felt at ease. Zhou Yun thought, I'm no longer the outer sect disciple who had to put in all my effort for the inner sect assessment. I should now be placed above the entire Spirit Valley and even the 5 sections. Zhou Yun knew that a cultivator should seek constant improvement, constantly forging ahead. Zhou Yun clenched his fists. He was very strong now and full of ambition. He could face all difficulties, even the one behind him. Then, Zhou Yun turned his head and looked at Su Lingyun, who had been staring at him from behind. BL.net Disciple Su, I hope you will take care of me during this trip. Zhou Yun could feel the resentment in Su Lingyun's eyes, but he could only pretend to ignore it. After all, Zhou Yun tricked Su Lingyun in order to get a spiritual meal. Alright, as your senior sister and a direct disciple, I will definitely take good care of you. Su Lingyun put on a fake smile. She walked up and patted Zhou Yun's shoulder, switching to a tone void of any trace of gentleness. I'll take care of you until you're absolutely satisfied. Brother Zhou Yun, disciple Su, you guys came so quickly. Xiao ran over. Her eyes lit up when she saw Zhou Yun, and she ran straight toward him. Behind Xiao was Su Wani. She was walking slowly, neither arrogant nor impatient, just like a lady from a wealthy family. Just Su Wani's walking posture alone dumbfounded the few servant disciples around them. Good morning. Did you guys properly pack your luggage yesterday? It's your first time out of the sect, so you have to be careful. Su Lingyun turned her head. Zhou Yun noticed that her deadpan look instantly turned into a gentle smile. Junior sister Qiao, you can call me senior sister Lingyun, just like how you call Wani senior sister Wani, Su Lingyun said with a smile. Yes, senior sister Lingyun, Qiao said happily. She was very happy to have another senior sister like Wani who took care of the people around her. Since everyone's here, let's get ready to set off. The first stop is one of the 3 cities, Fenghua City. It has been around for more than 300 years and is a city under the command of a dynasty ruler. Its name has the beautiful meaning of bountiful glory, Su Lingyun explained gently as she walked to the back. Zhou Yun was stunned. Didn't they have to leave the valley if they were going to Fenghua City? There was a protective array around the Spirit Valley. Unless they went out from the front, there was no way to exit, so why did Su Lingyun go to the back? Senior sister Lingyun. Xiao looked in Su Lingyun's direction, but she still walked to Zhou Yun's side and hugged his arm. I'm sorry, I forgot that you are the new batch of disciples and have not left Spirit Valley before. Su Lingyun turned her head and saw that they were standing there in a daze. 3 cities and 2 dangers. Actually, it's not that scary. Su Lingyun blinked her eyes playfully. She took out a miniature wooden boat from the small fragrance bag on her waist and threw it into the open space behind her. Bang! A large amount of white smoke burst out from the wooden boat. Su Lingyun waved her hand, and the white smoke dissipated, leaving only a wooden boat that could accommodate many people. This is the Cloud Boat. With it, not to mention the 3 cities and 2 hazards, we can even go back and forth to the treasure pavilion in just 1 day and 1 night. Su Lingyun patted the Cloud Boat proudly. The Cloud Boat is very fast. Ordinary Foundation establishment cultivators can't catch up with it even if they ride their flying swords. I'm sure our journey will be safe and sound. It was the first time Zhou Yun had seen the Cloud Boat. The most powerful spiritual weapon he had seen before was the strange-looking spiritual weapon that Grand Elder had used to help him with his Foundation establishment way back. It was the first time Zhou Yun had seen such a large spiritual weapon. Moreover, Su Lingyun said that ordinary Foundation establishment cultivators couldn't catch up with this spiritual weapon. It was simply a magic weapon for escaping. Zhou Yun was a little moved. Riding on a sword and sailing on a boat to admire the Sea of Clouds were the 2 immortal cultivation lives that he had been dreaming about for a long time. Let's get on the Cloud Boat and go to Fenghua City. Su Lingyun took the lead to board the ship. She then guided Zhou Yun and the others to board the ship. After he sat on it, Zhou Yun realized that the Cloud Boat actually contained a dense amount of spiritual energy. The density of the spiritual energy was not any different from his cave abode. Moreover, it was luxuriously decorated. Just sitting on the cushion was a pleasure. Rather than a simple mobile spiritual weapon, the boat was basically a mobile palace. Zhou Yun couldn't help but look at Su Lingyun, who was pretending to be gentle, and Su Wani, who had a gentle look on her face. He remembered that Su Lingyun had once revealed that she was from an aristocratic family, but he didn't know what the sisters' backgrounds were. Zhou Yun had only been rewarded with that cave abode after becoming the Spirit Valley's once-in-millennium disciple. However, Su Lingyun was able to take out a durable spiritual boat. What's wrong, junior brother Zhou Yun? Are you feeling dizzy because it's your first time on the cloud boat? Su Lingyun walked over to a place where Su Wani and Xiaoer couldn't see her. Her expression turned ugly, and she said in a low voice, "Little brat, you haven't seen the world, have you? This is my cloud boat." Wordlessly, Zhou Yun chose to close his eyes. Tisk, seeing that her provocation failed, Su Lingyun turned around and left. In the sky above Spirit Valley, the cloud boat slowly rose into the air and flew into the distance. As it moved, a large number of clouds were lifted. Its speed was shocking. Not long after the cloud boat left the Spirit Valley, in a forest in the Spirit Valley, a gold-eating marquis suddenly stopped. Its head suddenly turned 180 degrees, and its red eyes stared at the cloud boat in the sky. In a remote mountain village, there was no sign of life. All the corpses of the villagers were piled up in the middle of the village like a small mountain. Black air waves surrounded the corpses of the villagers and devoured them. Meng Yusin, the person you're looking for has appeared. A black-robed man standing in front of a pile of corpses suddenly said. You found Zhou Yun. One of the corpses suddenly made a sound, and the hoarse voice made the black-robed man feel dizzy. That's right. The soul setting incense on the gold-eating marquis has reacted. They are heading in the direction of Fenghua City. The black-robed man finally couldn't take it anymore. He knelt down on one knee and kept spitting out black blood. Chapter 57. Killing a spiritual corpse with a single strike. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 57. Killing a spiritual corpse with a single strike. Translator. Nyo I.bo Studio Editor. Nyo I.bo Studio. Lord Meng Yusin, your orders, please. Do we need to intercept and kill them on the way to avenge your brother, Meng Feiang? When the black-robed man was stared at by a corpse in the pile of corpses, he felt the blood in his body spurting out, as if it was about to explode. L.C. Humph, don't mention that trash in front of me. In the pile of corpses, another corpse raised its head. Its face was full of anger, and its mouth was torn open, madly gnawing on another corpse. I really don't understand why my parents delivered another child after 50 years. And they delivered such a useless piece of trash. With that, more corpses stood up and began to devour each other. One bit the other's flesh, and the scene was extremely bloody. The black-robed man who was originally kneeling on one knee had completely knelt down at this time, not daring to move an inch. For the master's plan to split the 5 sects, Meng Feiang is a necessary tool. Only with him can we destroy the 5 sects, the black-robed man said in a low voice. He could no longer feel the lower half of his body, as if he had completely lost all feeling. In the end, he's just a piece of trash. The Spirit Valley has that old fox, Ling Qingyun, not to mention the Su family. The chewing sound from the pile of corpses turned into a sentence, and the black-robed man didn't dare to say another word. Forget it. Arrange 5 spiritual corpses of the intermediate of Foundation establishment stage to intercept them outside of Fenghua City. In the end, the entire pile of corpses disappeared, leaving only 5 corpses that had turned black and had become thicker. The black-robed man trembled as he raised his head. He looked at the 5 spiritual corpses, moved his mouth, and finally spoke. However, Ling Qingyun's direct disciple, Su Lingyun of the Su family, is also there. Even if 10 late-stage Foundation establishment spiritual corpses were to try and kill them, they would be like moths flying into the fire, let alone 5 intermediate of Foundation establishment stage spiritual corpses. Humph! The 5 spiritual corpses snorted at the same time, causing the black-robed man to spit out black blood again. The black-robed man knelt down, not daring to say another word. The black-robed man, who was in the perfection of the late-stage foundation establishment, was like a chick that could die at any moment. Either you do it, or you become my spiritual corpse. As soon as the words were spoken, the black aura disappeared without a trace, leaving only the 5 spiritual corpses on the spot. The black-robed man remained kneeling, not daring to move. He only heaved a sigh of relief after several hours had passed. Invisible and shadowless zombie demons that render others powerless with their groans and hisses. I didn't expect that Meng Feiyang's death would make this monster come out of seclusion. The black-robed man was drenched in sweat. They were both heretic cultivators, but even after using all his techniques, he couldn't figure out Meng Yusin's attack. It's just as the rumors say. As long as I finish listening to a groan or a hiss, the third sound will make me helplessness. The black-robed man stood up, and the black blood slowly flowed back into his body. In a short while, the heavily injured black-robed man recovered his aura to its peak. Zhou Yun, the glory disciple of the Spirit Valley, and Su Lingyun, the genius of the Su family, you can only blame yourselves for provoking Meng Yusin. The black-robed man jumped into the air with the 5 spiritual corpse shields. Fenghua City was a city with a population of only 1 million. Because of its strange geographical conditions, spring always came 10 days earlier than other regions in the city. As a result, it had the reputation of the glorious spring city. Zhou Yun was currently walking on the streets of Fenghua City. There were many people coming and going, shoulder to shoulder. On his left and right were Su Lingyun and Su Wani, the 2 beautiful twins, respectively. Meanwhile, he was also holding hands with the well-behaved and cute Xiaoer. The 4 of them were already outstanding in appearance, not to mention that they were cultivators. None of them present were lower than the foundation establishment stage, so their temperament also made people feel that they were somewhat otherworldly. Just walking on the streets made Zhou Yun feel a sense of strangeness. That was because no one dared to get within a 1-meter radius of the 4 of them. Rather than saying that the crowd was afraid of them, it was more like Zhou Yun felt that they were being surrounded and watched. Disciple Su, why did we come to Fenghua City? If we have the cloud boat, shouldn't we go to the treasure pavilion directly? Zhou Yun asked curiously. He knew that Su Lingyun was a lazy person and didn't want to act gentle in front of others. But this trip to Fenghua City was a waste of time. Zhou Yun furrowed his brows. He could feel that ever since they left the Spirit Valley and alighted from the cloud boat, the world had changed. Originally, the cloud boat and the Spirit Valley were places full of spiritual energy, but when Zhou Yun arrived in Fenghua City, he truly felt how scarce the spiritual energy was in this world. Zhou Yun felt like he was a fish out of the water. He could only sense a thin amount of spiritual energy in this world. That bit of spiritual energy was too little, he couldn't even absorb it. In other words, if Zhou Yun were to spend all his spiritual force in Fenghua City, he would be reduced to a mere mortal with a stronger body than average. He might be at the mercy of others at the next moment. It was no wonder that many forces would be destroyed after losing their source of spiritual energy. The spiritual energy in the world was too scarce. Zhou Yun felt uneasy. At the same time, he was even more curious as to why Su Lingyun wanted to come here. Don't worry, I will protect you, Su Lingyun consoled him in a soft voice. At the same time, she pointed at Zhou Yun's bag and said, if you don't have enough spiritual energy, you can absorb the spiritual energy from the spiritual stones to make up for it. You should also adapt to the outside environment as soon as possible. Su Lingyun's voice was a little ethereal as she stared into the distance for a while. There are many things that can't be accomplished just by staying in the Spirit Valley, whether it's the 5-sex tournament or the feud between our families. Then, Su Lingyun suddenly shouted, let's get out of the city. We have guests. She made a hand seal, and a gust of wind swept up Zhou Yun and the other 2 into the sky. Senior Sister Lingyun, where are we going? Xiaoer hugged Zhou Yun in the air and asked Su Lingyun with a puzzled look. Ling Yun, the 5 sects have ordered that we can't interfere too much with the lives of mortals. You'll be blamed if you use magic on the streets like this, Su Wani said with a headache as she transferred some spiritual power to Su Lingyun to share the skill burden. Su Lingyun shook her head and pointed to the outside of the city with excitement. At the moment, everyone was already flying high. They looked in the direction pointed out by Su Lingyun and saw 5 small black dots flying in the sky. Heretic cultivators. Su Wani's smile disappeared and she didn't dwell on what Su Lingyun had just done. Why are there heretic cultivators here? And it seems like they're coming for us. Xiao became nervous. She pulled out the sword from behind her and held Zhou Yun in her arms as she held the sword in front of her. Zhou Yun looked at the heretic cultivators in front of him and then at Su Lingyun. Could it be that Su Lingyun knew that there would be heretic cultivators? Zhou Yun gave up on the idea of asking. He drew his spiritual sword and prepared to fight. Chapter 58. A nerve-wrecking battle. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 58. A nerve-wrecking battle. Translator. Nyo iwo Studio Editor. Nyo iwo Studio, Wani, take the 2 of them and find a good place to land. Let me deal with them. Su Lingyun took out her sword as she turned around and said. Her face showed a bloodthirsty look that was not in line with her character. Brother Zhou Yun. Xiao felt her body become empty. The spell on her body had been removed by Su Lingyun. This way. Zhou Yun picked Xiao up with both hands and flew down on his flying sword, not caring about her blushing face. Fighting in the outside world consumed too much spiritual energy. He had to be careful. Furthermore, Zhou Yun did not want Xiao to be affected. Junior brother Zhou Yun, over here. Su Wani used her flight spell to lead the way. Zhou Yun followed her and flew to a mountain before stopping. Just as Zhou Yun put down Xiao, whose face was red from happiness, a loud explosion came from the sky behind him. Boom! A cloud of black mist exploded in the air, and 3 black shadows flew out from the black mist. Those 3 black shadows flew straight in Zhou Yun's direction. Each of them exuded a terrifying aura of a heretic cultivator and an intermediate of foundation establishment stage cultivator. Defend! Zhou Yun did not dare to hesitate. He did not hold back the spiritual energy in his body, and a large amount of spiritual energy was poured into the spiritual sword. Forward! Zhou Yun swiped his finger and an extremely sharp setting sun sword intent attached itself to the body of the spiritual sword. After Su Lingyun's reminder, Zhou Yun knew that trash spiritual swords could only be used with manually applied sword intent. If it was Su Lingyun's sword, Zhou Yun would only need to infuse his spiritual energy into it and he would be able to control the sword to release setting sun sword intent. The setting sun sword intent that I've infused into it is only enough to activate it 10 times. If we can't finish off the enemy in front of us after 10 times, then this basic spiritual sword will be destroyed in battle. Zhou Yun activated his spiritual sword to face the enemy. His weapon was of low quality, so he had to use his skills to make up for it. This is the first time I'm fighting an intermediate of foundation establishment stage heretic cultivator. How strong am I now? Zhou Yun wondered. He didn't forget that Meng Feiyang's cultivation had broken through to the foundation establishment stage after he had become a heretic cultivator. Back then, Zhou Yun could only defend himself and not attack. But now, Zhou Yun had already built his foundation, and he could feel that his strength had increased by quite a bit. Command. The moment Zhou Yun recited the 3rd incantation, the spiritual sword trembled violently. The next moment, the spiritual sword flew out like a stream of light and instantly collided with the first of the 3 figures. For a moment, the sword energy in the sky was bright. The sun-set sword technique was like the setting sun in the sky, and the surrounding sky was dyed red. Clang! The sound of metal colliding with stone came from the air. Su Wani looked at the collision in the sky and could not help but look at Zhou Yun in surprise. In just over a month, Zhou Yun had surprised her so many times. Not only could he master the sword control technique, but he could also attach sword intent to it. Su Wanyi realized that the more she came into contact with Zhou Yun, the more surprises he brought her. "Brother Zhou Yun, you're amazing." One of the figures in the sky fell down. Xiao pointed at the sky and shouted excitedly. Zhou Yun frowned. He had not let his guard down completely. When he was controlling the spiritual sword, he felt a very strange touch when he collided with the other party. It was as if he was not slashing at the opponent's body, but an extremely hard piece of metal. I cut off his arm. Zhou Yun held his spiritual sword in front of him and the three figures finally landed in front of them. The first figure's arm had already disappeared, and what was left was an extremely smooth cut. Zhou Yun realized what his first strike had struck. It's not a living person. It's a spiritual corpse. It's a spiritual corpse that's formed by refining the corpses of many mortals. Their bodies are comparable to metal and stone, and every spiritual corpse is extremely powerful. Ordinary late-stage foundation establishment cultivators would have to run away if they encounter them, Su Wanyi explained. She put away the sword, took out a white medicine bottle from her bag, and dripped a drop of the medicine on the sword. The corpse liquid is effective against spiritual corpses. You guys should use it too. Su Wanyi threw the medicine bottle over. Spiritual corpses don't have intelligence. They will only follow orders. If we are careful, we can still hold up against just 3 spiritual corpses. Su Wanyi said seriously, we just need to wait until Disciple Su annihilates the other party's leader. If we can drag it out until then, we will win. She was very confident in the battle in the sky. Crash. Just as Zhou Yun was about to take the liquid, the bottle containing the liquid was smashed into pieces by a flying rock in mid-air. The 3 spiritual corpses walked forward slowly with mocking expressions on their faces. Then, the 3 spiritual corpses charged at the 3 of them. Thump, thump, thump. Each of the 3 spiritual corpses' stomps created a huge pit in the ground. BDNVL.M Zhou Yun even suspected that the spiritual beasts in the secret realm would be torn apart by those spiritual corpses if they were around. Quickly get ready. There's someone controlling these spiritual corpses. Su Wanyi shouted for Zhou Yun and Zhou Ling to stay on alert. Her face was full of anxiety. A intermediate of foundation establishment stage spiritual corpse that was merely fighting blindly could only be dealt with by a late-stage foundation establishment cultivator. But the spiritual corpses in front of them were being controlled by someone. I must protect them. Su Wanyi's face turned cold. Just as she was about to raise the sword in her hand, she was attacked by a fierce wind in the next moment. Su Wanyi's sword was sent flying by the spiritual corpse within one move. She clenched her teeth and held her wrist. One attack had shattered the web between her thumb and forefinger, and blood was flowing out. At that moment, Su Wanyi realized that the spiritual corpse's body had grown a little bigger. It was as terrifying as a small giant. Even its aura was rising steadily and was about to reach the late-stage foundation establishment. This is not an ordinary spiritual corpse, and the person controlling it is not an ordinary heretic cultivator. Su Wanyi reminded Zhou Yun as she felt a wave of despair. If she had not reacted quickly, she would have been killed by the spiritual corpse. Zhou Yun looked at the 2 spiritual corpses in front of him. He was nervous as he slowly pulled Xiao behind him. You guys came here to kill me, right? Zhou Yun looked at the sky and then at the spiritual corpses that were standing still. Is it because of Meng Feiyang? Seeing that the spirit corpse did not reply, Zhou Yun continued to speak. Meng Feiyang. Isn't he the one who became a heretic cultivator? Xiao did not expect Zhou Yun to say that name. Only then did she realize that the 3 spiritual corpses were all staring at Zhou Yun. Even after Su Wanyi was sent flying, they did not follow up with another attack. Instead, they surrounded Zhou Yun. Don't even think about laying your hands on brother Zhou Yun. I'll protect him. Xiao held her spiritual sword, which was emitting a faint sword chi. Zhou Yun, you are the most talented junior brother I have ever seen. Run quickly and help us take revenge in the future. Su Wani walked to Zhou Yun with a determined expression. Wohaha. The three spiritual corpses laughed at the same time. You want to save them? I can't. Just as the spiritual corpses were halfway through their sentence, a red ray of light spread out with Zhou Yun as the center. The indestructible red light surrounded Zhou Yun, Su Wani, and Xiao, then spread out to the outside. Guh. The head of a spiritual corpse fell off. Chapter 59. A sword that cuts the heavens. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 59. A sword that cuts the heavens. Translator. Nyo-i.bo Studio Editor. Nyo-i.bo Studio. The red stream of light from the sun. Set sword technique was like a red sun in full bloom, flashing between the three spiritual corpses. Plop. A spiritual corpse's head fell to the ground. Its eyes were still filled with disbelief. Ling 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 ling. Zhou Yun quickly gave 4 consecutive orders. He no longer cared about the beheaded spiritual corpse as he turned around and madly slashed at the remaining 2 spiritual corpses with his spiritual sword. Detestable. That sun. Set sword technique used up 5 layers of sword chi, but only cut off a head, an arm, and a leg. Zhou Yun's sneak attack had failed. He did not hesitate to continue his attack. Su Wani and Xiao's eyes were full of vigor. They had originally given up all hope and planned to help Zhou Yun protect the rear. However, he did not expect Zhou Yun to turn the tide of the battle in an instant. Su Wani touched her chest and looked at Zhou Yun. For some reason, the request that Zhou Yun had for her to be his partner at that time appeared in her mind. Su Wani quickly shook her head and shook this ridiculous thought out of her mind. Zhou Yun furrowed his brows. The first sneak attack had made the remaining 2 spiritual corpses prepare for it. The 4 rays of sun. Set sword chi flashed past and were blocked by the 2 spiritual corpses using different methods. The 4 rays of the sun. Set sword chi were actually unable to behead them. Collect. Looking at the 2 spiritual corpses that were missing an arm or a leg, Zhou Yun kept his spiritual sword. Zhou Yun, Zhou Yun. It's you. You dared to kill Meng Feiyang and ruin their plan, and now you dare to resist. Can't you just scream and wail in despair and obediently accept your death? The remaining 2 spiritual corpses spoke at the same time, and their faces were filled with madness. However, the sword chi that your senior has stored in the spiritual sword has been used up. I'd like to see how you're going to face my indestructible spiritual corpse without the sword chi of great completion as your trump card. The remaining 2 spiritual corpses shouted excitedly. It seemed to have seen the scene of Zhou Yun being beaten to death by him. Hosting sword chi. Zhou Yun was puzzled. Where did he get a senior to give him hosting sword chi? Humph. If it wasn't for the golden core cultivator's sword chi in your spiritual sword, how could you hurt me? It's precisely because my spiritual corpse has boundless strength that it can kill people of a higher realm. Ordinary Foundation establishment cultivators can't even break through its defense. The spiritual corpse said as it approached. You're just an early stage Foundation establishment trash. How could you possibly use the great stage sword chi? The spiritual corpse felt that it had Zhou Yun in its grasp. This was because the prodigies of the 5 sects were like family treasures to it, and all of them were memorized in its heart. This Zhou Yun was just a good for nothing who only knew how to refine pills. Even if there were only 2 spiritual corpses left, they had full confidence that they could kill them. Oh. You're that confident. Zhou Yun furrowed his brows. After the battle, he realized that the spiritual corpse's speed was not as fast as he had imagined. The spiritual corpse had relied on its tough body and great strength to make Su Wani helpless. However, no matter how tough the spiritual corpse was, he, Zhou Yun, could still kill it. Because he had already comprehended the great completion of sword intent. Boom! Suddenly, there was an explosion in the sky, and a few figures fell from the sky. Sister. Su Wani saw Su Lingyun hugging her shoulders and spitting out blood, so she rushed over. Phew, as expected of the Su family's heaven's favorite. My lord, I'm glad I didn't fail my mission. The black-robed man walked over with two incomplete spiritual corpses. His aura was extremely chaotic. He took out a bottle of black blood and drank it in one gulp, recovering his aura to its peak. Old thing, your evil sect has been destroyed for 180 years, and you're still alive. If it were me, I would have died long ago. Su Lingyun pursed her lips and cursed as she walked to Zhou Yun's side. This person is not easy to deal with. Every time he is injured, he can quickly recover. Be careful. Every time Su Lingyun wanted to kill the black-robed man, she would be stopped by the spiritual corpse. Then, she would find out that the black-robed man had recovered from his injuries and was even getting more courageous as the battle progressed. She had no choice but to come down and join them. Your Excellency, please give your orders. The black-robed man did not reply. He stood respectfully behind the four spiritual corpses, not daring to act rashly. Su Lingyun, you have a spiritual boat with you. I can't catch up with you if you want to run. However, as long as you come out of the Spirit Valley, I can hunt you down again. The spiritual corpse stepped forward and pointed at Zhou Yun. Leave him to me. I promise I won't cause you any trouble next time. Otherwise, you will hide in the Spirit Valley forever. No. You can't hand over Brother Zhou Yun. Xiao was the first to retort. She stood in front of Zhou Yun to protect him. That's right. You can't trust the words of the heretic cultivator. It'll be fine as long as we escape, sister. Su Wani also said anxiously. She subconsciously stood in front of Zhou Yun. Zhou Yun felt that he was being protected too well. Xiao and Su Wani still thought that he was the Qi cultivation kid from before. He was already at the foundation establishment stage. Furthermore, he was the one who had contributed to the battle against the spiritual corpse. Zhou Yun patted Xiao's head and asked her to leave. He knew that Xiao was worried about him, but now was not the time for her to be arrogant. Zhou Yun was furious. He felt that the spiritual corpse was looking down on him. Disciple Su, I'm confident in beating him. Zhou Yun stepped forward and said. At the same time, he gave Su Lingyun a look, signaling her to protect Xiao and Su Wani when the fight started. Su Lingyun tilted her head and then smiled. Did you see that? Even my junior brother has said so. It seems that you will all die here today. Su Lingyun shouted at the spiritual corpse. Zhou Yun entered the battle mode. He gripped the spiritual sword in his hand tightly. The spiritual sword was already in a state of ruin, but he could still continue to swing it. So, I choose to continue. Fight. As soon as Su Lingyun finished her words, everyone at the scene moved. Zhou Yun lowered his body, and the sword in his hand once again emitted a glow like the setting sun. How is that possible? Why do you still have the great stage sword Qi? The spiritual corpse cried out in disbelief. With a wave of its hand, it threw the black-robed man, who had not been able to react in time, at Zhou Yun. Zhou Yun did not hesitate at all. He charged forward and quickly swung his sword. A ray of sun-set sword Qi, accompanied by a sonic boom, sent everything in front of it flying and cut it in half. Impossible. This was absolutely impossible. This sword Qi is even more powerful than before. The spiritual corpse looked at the overwhelming sword Qi that was spreading toward it, and its face was filled with panic. The black-robed man who had been thrown away was cleanly cut into two. The sword Qi did not stop at all and continued to slash in the direction of the spiritual corpse. You were the one who slashed out that sword chi. It's not the sword chi that someone gave you. The spiritual corpse shouted in despair. It gathered the remaining 3 spiritual corpses behind it, and a large amount of black chi spread out from its body. When the sun-set sword chi came into contact with the black gas, a large number of corrosive sounds were produced. However, the sun-set sword chi did not stop. It had destroyed everything in front of Zhou Yun. The 4 spiritual corpses were cut in half by the sun-set sword chi as they roared in anger. Whoosh! It's truly a heaven-splitting sword strike. Su Lingyun whistled and looked at the hundreds of meters in front of her that had been flattened. Her eyes moved slightly. Chapter 60. The World Outside Spirit Valley. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 60. The World Outside Spirit Valley. Translator. Nyo Iwo Studio Editor. Nyo Iwo Studio. Zhou Yun panted heavily. He raised the spiritual sword in his hand, only to realize that the blade of the spiritual sword had been turned into powder in the previous wave. It's been hard on you. You've been with me for a year. Zhou Yun was a little emotional. This was his first spiritual sword. He had never thought that he could use it to kill 4 spiritual corpses and a late-stage Foundation establishment cultivator. Junior brother Zhou, do you know how I feel right now? Su Lingyun walked up and patted Zhou Yun's shoulder. Because I'm too much of a genius, you want to vomit. Zhou Yun slapped her hand away and walked to the black-robed man. The 4 spiritual corpses had been completely killed, leaving only the late-stage Foundation establishment cultivator. Zhou Yun still remembered Su Lingyun's words. As long as he drank the black blood, he would be able to recover from his injuries. Zhou Yun stared at the black-robed man. I don't want to puke. I just feel that I'm not alone. Finally, someone can walk with me on the path of the sword. Su Lingyun walked over and said. She stepped on the black-robed man under her feet and pouted, stop looking. This old man has run away. The 5 sects couldn't kill him even when they besieged him 180 years ago. With your sword, you have no chance. Your sword Dao is very strong. Zhou Yun looked at Su Lingyun suspiciously. The sky was filled with black mist just now, and he didn't see Su Lingyun fight. However, Su Lingyun's sword intent didn't seem to be that strong since she couldn't even kill the black-robed man. Of course, Zhou Yun wouldn't say it out loud because he was still counting on Su Lingyun to help him buy a spiritual sword. Really? So your swordsmanship is also very powerful. It's really good. Zhou Yun said. You don't believe me. I'm super brave. Su Lingyun could tell at a glance that Zhou Yun didn't mean what he said. She wanted to be angry, but then she let out a sigh of relief. The 2 of you, come down. Su Lingyun made a hand seal, and the cloud boat in the air slowly descended. However, disciple Su, you really did a good job. Without you, I wouldn't have been able to act so freely. Zhou Yun only dared to take the risk after he saw Su Lingyun send Xiao and Su Wani up the cloud boat. Brother Zhou Yun. Xiao jumped down from the flying boat and rushed into Zhou Yun's arms. She hugged Zhou Yun tightly. Zhou Yun, are you all right? Su Wani also looked at Zhou Yun worriedly and asked gently. Su Lingyun looked at Zhou Yun, who was unharmed, and then at herself, who was injured after the battle. TSK, you can't keep a grown woman. Su Lingyun felt that it was great. It would be best if someone married Su Wani. Then, she wouldn't have to see Su Wani anymore and wouldn't have to pretend to be the perfect sister. Zhou Yun patted Xiaoer's head. He had not expected to meet a heretic cultivator on his first trip out of Spirit Valley. He did not hold back at all in his attack just now. He used all his strength to fight against 4 spiritual corpses that were close to the late-stage Foundation establishment and 1 late-stage Foundation establishment cultivator. He had used up all of his spiritual energy in one strike, activating his most powerful setting Sun Sword Intent. Zhou Yun bit his lips. He could feel a burst of pain in his body. This was the discomfort of lacking too much spiritual energy. However, there was too little spiritual energy in heaven and earth. Zhou Yun was unable to recover his spiritual energy and could only bear it. Right now, it was already very strenuous for him to just stand. He might not even be able to walk. Alright, you two, it's time to board the boat. We still have to go to the treasure pavilion. Su Lingyun clapped her hands to snap Su Wani and Xiaoer back to their senses. She walked over and lifted Zhou Yun up. How is it? It's the first time you've used up all of your spiritual energy in a place where it's completely depleted. It's not good, right? Su Lingyun said in a soft voice. She didn't let the other two people hear her and put Zhou Yun down on the cloud boat. Only after boarding the cloud boat did Zhou Yun feel the familiar spirit energy density. He quickly absorbed the spirit energy to recover his body. Take a rest and recover your spiritual energy. I'll call you when we reach the treasure pavilion. Don't worry, I'll look after the two of them and won't come back to disturb you. Su Lingyun nodded, then she pulled Xiaoer and Su Wani to the front of Xingyun. Phew, I've finally survived. Zhou Yun felt that he was still excited about the battle. The spiritual corpse, which was comparable to the late Stage Foundation establishment, and the black-robed man, who was at the late Stage Foundation establishment, had all been destroyed by him alone. Zhou Yun was excited, but he also felt the pressure. Sure enough, the aristocratic families that Su Lingyun mentioned earlier are heretic cultivators. Could Meng Feiyang's family be a heretic cultivator? Zhou Yun clenched his fist. He still felt a wave of weakness. Although I used the sun-set sword technique and saved us, I still got the upper hand in the end. Zhou Yun was not complacent. Due to the lack of information, the other party thought that he did not have the great stage sword chi. Zhou Yun even thought that the other party had intentionally allowed him to succeed in the beginning because he wanted to use the spiritual corpse to exhaust his sword chi. He just didn't expect that he really comprehended the great stage sword chi. However, other than catching the enemy off guard, my sword chi also happened to restrain the enemy this time. That's why I was able to win. Zhou Yun knew that the spiritual corpses relied on their metal and stone bodies and their boundless strength. Even Su Wani, the eldest senior sister of the Spirit Valley's inner sect, was helpless against the spiritual corpse. It was just that his great stage of sword intent was able to restrain the slow movement of the spiritual corpse. If the other party didn't send a spiritual corpse, I might have died. Zhou Yun clenched his fist. No, even if they are still spiritual corpses, as long as a few more of them come, they will be enough to exhaust me to death. Zhou Yun coughed. He had used up all of his spiritual energy to kill it. If another spiritual corpse ambushed him, he would probably die here. Or perhaps, he had to rely on Su Lingyun's cloud boat to escape. I still need to become stronger. At the very least, I can't be arrogant and complacent now. Zhou Yun felt a sense of urgency. He had never felt such a sense of urgency in the Spirit Valley. You have to strike a balance between work and rest. If you cultivate before your spiritual energy has recovered, you will damage your body. Su Lingyun suddenly appeared in front of Zhou Yun. She was holding a spirit fruit that had been peeled and was tender and juicy. Did you find that the outside world is different from the Spirit Valley? Very desolate. Is it very dangerous? Zhou Yun thought of the crowded Fenghua city that had no spiritual power and the heretic cultivators who were trying to kill him. That's because you just came out not long ago. Take a look around. The world outside Spirit Valley is very big. The world outside the 5 sects is also very big. Su Lingyun smiled, therefore, you have to take good care of your body to see a richer world. Here, eat and rest. You can't cultivate before you've fully recovered, you hear me? Su Lingyun threw the spiritual fruit to Zhou Yun and said as she walked out. She only left after she finished her sentence. Crunch. Zhou Yun took a bite of the spirit fruit and realized that it was really sweet. He finished the spirit fruit in 2 or 3 bites. Then, he sat cross-legged and adjusted his breathing, quickly recovering his spiritual energy. After a long time, Zhou Yun was disturbed by the noise and came back to his senses. Bang! Several tens or hundreds of explosions rang out in all directions. Zhou Yun raised his head and realized that there were flying boats of different sizes all around him. Each flying boat had several cultivators on it. None of these cultivators were below the foundation establishment stage. There were even large flying boats that were as tall as buildings. Zhou Yun could even feel the aura that only the elders of the Spirit Valley had. The Golden Core Stage. Zhou Yun's eyes were finally attracted by the huge group of people in the sky. It was a pavilion that could cover the sky. The pavilion was like a palace in the sky, shining with golden light. A plaque with 1,000-year-old wood sign was hanging in front of it. The Treasure Pavilion.